Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Spotlight on Automotive. I'm Tricia Grace, the Alumni Employer Engagement Coordinator with the Alumni Relations team. I am delighted to introduce our panelists today who will share insights on how healthy the automotive industry is coming out of COVID lockdown, the future direction of the industry, and career pathways. And it's going to hang on. I think everyone is here. Excellent. Okay. So let's start with Jean-Francois Champagne. He is the president of the Automotive Industry Association of Canada, representing the interests of the automotive aftermarket. JF has had the opportunity to speak across Canada on topics including new and emerging technology, the automotive aftermarket sector, which we're going to learn more about, and organizational effectiveness. Welcome, JF.
Thank you very much.
Jesse Cassell is the National Director of Operations overseeing automotive recruitment for the auto recruitment firm of Auto Careers Group and has more than 15 years of experience in the automotive industry. Jesse's background includes business development, sales and marketing. She's a big advocate for women to enter and thrive in the automotive industry. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks so much for having me.
Gabriel Costa is a recent graduate of our project management program and is currently working as a program manager with Kobe Enstel Automotive Inc. Gabriel also has a degree in mechanical engineering from Brazil. His work background includes program management analyst with Ford Motor Company and more than 3 years at Otterbrecht as field engineer and project coordinator. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thanks so much for having me, guys, today.
Well, this is great. We're all looking forward to it. I really appreciate your time. There's a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So if for the participants, if you're experiencing any connection issues or have a question or comment, please click there's a purple arrow. You can just click on that in the lower right-hand corner and you can add your question to the chat. There is someone who's moderating the questions and comments, and we've dedicated about 10 minutes to questions at the end of the discussion. So we'll address your questions then. The discussion will go to about 12:40. So let's get started. And I'd like JF to tell us a little bit more about the role of the Automotive Industry Association of Canada and your role specifically.
Sure. Thank you again, and welcome everyone. So I guess my role, I'm the president of the association. We're a trade association. We are the people who represent the interest of, as we said before, the automotive aftermarket. And sometimes people say, what's the aftermarket? And we're basically everything that comes after a car is sold. So we often think about, the manufacturing of new cars, the selling of new cars, but guess what? There's about 30 million vehicles on Canadian roads today. And one other piece of statistics, these cars typically are about 10 years old. And so they do require a lot of maintenance and repairs, and there's an entire ecosystem, I guess, of companies, organizations, everything from manufacturing replacement parts to the whole supply chain that makes sure the right parts are at the right place. So everyone could get their car serviced and repaired. And so that's the sort of the industry that includes, again, manufacturer, distribution outlets, repairs of the aftermarket in Canada. And another maybe one statistics is that our industry essentially employs right now in Canada about 490,000 people. There are more people in the automotive aftermarket than there are in agriculture or natural resources in Canada. So a big industry that's often people don't understand, but it's very vibrant in Canada.
Thank you. I know you're right. I think often when people think of the automotive industry, they tend to think of just the manufacturing side, putting out the cars. And we do put out, I think, something like 2 million cars a year in Canada are rolled off the line. But I think that it's interesting to learn about that whole, as you say, ecosystem behind how those vehicles get out onto the road and all the other services that are provided around that. Thank you. Jesse, I have a question for you. As someone involved in recruitment, specifically recruiting for dealerships, What sort of impact has been felt during the past year and a half in regards to meeting the requirements for good candidates?
That's a great question. I think, we work with dealerships primarily, so my opinion is going to come from that aspect of the business. And like any business, really, dealerships were hit just as hard. Business was down, sales volumes were down, and sales is what they base their decisions on. So when it comes to staffing, we saw a lot of layoffs happening, throughout the pandemic as the news changed, whether or not we were open, then we were closed, and, a lot of back and forth. So it was really important for dealerships and businesses as a whole, really, to keep expenses low. So they really started to take a look at their business from a new perspective and say, okay, where can we cut? Who do we need to keep? And then they started looking for different solutions, like, can we consolidate certain roles? And how can we really get the most out of what we have while keeping expenses low? So we saw a lot of that sort of sentiment throughout the pandemic.
But it's interesting to hear that. At first, I think the automotive industry, there was definitely a slump and it was hard to get parts. And then it seemed that everyone wanted to buy a car. Suddenly, car sales really jumped. And so I would imagine with your recruitment in the dealership that you may have had that you've been able to respond to that need.
Absolutely. I mean, as a company, we needed to continue working and staying in touch with people. That's really the nature of our business. And we kind of became, recruiters / therapists during that time because we had just such an influx of candidates who were laid off and who didn't know what their next move was going to be, because frankly, their employer didn't really know what was around the corner either. So, we continued to stay in touch with everybody, including our clients. And so when we saw that pent-up demand that happened, which caused sales to go up, at that point we were ready as a company. However, I would still say that dealerships were still cautious as far as increasing their expenses, not knowing how long that would last for and if it would take a dip again.
And just one last thing around that. So in the dealership, how many people on average work in a dealership?
It's a hard question to answer because there's so many different types of dealerships. I mean, okay. You have, on the low end, you could have honestly 10 people working, or you could have 200 people working. Okay. So it just depends on the location and the size of the dealership. But yeah, dealerships as a whole, I think we're down like 30% or so. In sales. So, that's really the domino effect, which will then impact everything else that comes after that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jesse. I did want to ask JF, as far as COVID goes, how has the automotive industry managed through this havoc that's been caused across Canada? And where is the strongest growth as we venture out of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, as Jesse pointed out, obviously through the pandemic, people, for a short while could not buy a vehicle. We, circled around essential services. And we have to understand is the mobility of people will always be an essential service. And so if you think about the aftermarket, yes, there was some downturn for sure, difficulty in the supply chain, but overall, from an automotive aftermarket, very resilient industry. What happened is people trying to buy cars and there was supply issues. Well, they buy a used car. Well, guess what? These used car requires more maintenance. As the economy picks up a bit, people start to travel to vacations, more miles driven on a vehicle, more maintenance and requirements. So we always say the aftermarket is typically a very resilient type of industry that is not really impacted by downturns of the economy. We're deemed essential. And so if you think about Canadian Tire, a recognizable name, member of AIA, who provides that parts that you could buy, but also the service to install it, they've, for the most part, remained open. If you think about a Napa Auto Store or Napa Auto Pro repair centers, those locations remained open. And the latest indications we have is they are seeing very good signals that their business is almost back to normal, if you want to call it that way, whatever that new normal is. But we also represent people in collision repair, so a Fix Auto, a Car Star, those kind of brand that you're going to go to when you get into a fender bender. These businesses are still relatively down based on the fact that you need a lot of people on the road to cause collisions. We haven't seen as much traffic as we normally do, so they are continuing to see a bit of a downturn. But they too see some very good indicators. We're looking at the US right now. We're about, I don't know, depending where you are in Canada, about 5 to 8 weeks behind the Americans, and they're seeing, very good indicators that they're going to some normalcy. And so I would say in short, we are an industry that's resilient, that is essential, that continues to always have very good fundamentals because we put more cars on the road, there are more people moving, and that requires obviously a lot of people in that industry.
Well, that is great news then for the automotive industry. Thank you. Gabriel, it's always great to have a grad on the panel because I know the graduates out there are always very excited to hear about the experience of one of our graduates. So can you share a little bit with us around your career journey? You started working in the automotive industry in your home country of Brazil, is that right?
That's correct.
And then how did your journey take you back into the automotive industry in Canada?
So thank you so much once again for having me with you guys today. So this was interesting story as we talked before. When I was at university, this was not something that I was aiming at, but I was looking for an internship. I ended up finding one in the automotive market. So I tend to say when I talk to people that the automotive market chose me rather than the opposite. So in an interesting way, I ended up having other work opportunities after that, but the automotive was always something that appealed to myself. So I worked in construction and industrial maintenance, but my goal was to go back to the automotive industry. And when I moved to Canada back in 2019, this was something that I was striving for. It was something that I was looking for as a goal for my career, my personal and professional realization. So my idea was to get some more formal education in project management in order to apply the technical knowledge that I had and put these two together. And I could realize that the automotive industry here in Canada is way stronger than what I used to have in my home country. So there are opportunities in a broad variety of areas, not only in the manufacturing itself, but also in a whole bunch of services associated to it. And that was something that really caught my attention. And I realized a potential for me to build a career, continue from where I started on back a few years ago. So that's mostly what driven me through this path. So it chose me at the beginning, and then I chose to continue pursuing it moving forward. And it doesn't make long that I was on the other side of the screen, like listening to recent grad speakings, and I can say that George Brown definitely contributed to bring me where I am now.
Oh, that's great to hear. Now, a lot of people know Ford, Honda, General Motors. These are really common, popular, notions of the automotive industry. But Kobe-Enstell, not so much. Can you tell us a little bit about the company?
Sure. Yeah, so we are a company that started roughly 30 years ago. But then we got acquired by another company, so we got merged, and now we are one of the suppliers for mostly Honda and Toyota. We also supply some parts for Ford Motor Company as well. So our main business is stamped metal parts and welded seat assembles. So we produce the back seats, for example, of the CR-V, of the Honda Civic, and we produce lots of parts, small stamped parts for a few of the Toyota programs that are both manufactured here in Woodstock, in Elmira, and also in Michigan, USA. So our main business is to provide them with parts. But my main duty in the company is looking ahead. I'm here as a program manager, so I'm working on the development of projects that are going to be launched in 2022 or 2023, developing the tools and working with our supply chain in order to have a smooth launch in the upcoming years.
Fantastic. Just going to check to see, do you know how many are employed at the company? What the
How
number is?
big currently? So here in Canada, we have about 200 employees,
Oh, it's big.
and we have a plant in Alabama, USA, and there we have around 70 to 80 employees.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you sound like you've arrived exactly where you needed to be. So that's great.
Thank you.
Jesse, I wanted to ask you about the positions that your company recruits for. What does the perfect candidate look like, both for technical and admin skills, but also soft skills? We hear a lot of talk nowadays about the soft skills. What can you share with us around what your company looks at?
Great question. So one, there is no perfect candidate. We often talk to our clients about that. It's just really a matter of the position and the company, the culture, what is it that they're looking for, and we're really looking for that match as opposed to somebody looks really great on paper. Now, as a recruitment firm, of course, companies come to us because they're looking for a plug and play, right? Someone that already has the experience, already can be a natural fit in their organization, and they either have tried and failed, couldn't find somebody, and that's why they're coming to us to utilize our expertise and our database of candidates that we have. So there's no perfect candidate. However, I will say, in interviewing, hundreds and hundreds of candidates throughout my time here, one of the things that I found really interesting that we get as feedback from our clients often has to do with the person's energy level throughout the interview, their attitude and their mindset. And the things that you don't often, you don't see that through a resume, and really the story behind who they are, because everyone that we send has the qualifications, right? They're good on paper, and the real difference is going to be those things that I mentioned. So it doesn't always, it's not, your resume is not the make or break of your career. It's going to be what you say in the interview, how well you click, with that organization, having the energy, the enthusiasm, and the right mindset, I find is really the things that we often get feedback on.
So it's more how the candidate comes across. Are they excited about the opportunity? Do they have a history of being someone who really contributes to a team? All that sort of thing sounds important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the number one thing is they have to be able to imagine whether or not they can work with you. Can they see themselves? Because you spend so much time at work, right? Especially on the retail side, you're there more than you are at home. More often than not. So, they're really looking for the individual that is going to, yes, contribute and has the right qualifications, but more than that, can they work within the environment of that organization and thrive?
Fantastic. And so when you're recruiting, I guess, from everything from a bookkeeper to a sales manager, marketing coordinator, those kinds of positions?
Yeah, so I would say 80% of our business comes from the dealership side of things. However, we are an automotive firm, so we have dabbled a bit in various different types of automotive companies, from suppliers to the manufacturers, everything in between. So most of what we do is at the management level, just I think because in today's world there is so many options when it comes to connecting with other people, like LinkedIn, for example, or job boards. So for maybe some of the more entry-level positions, organizations do tend to go that route. But when it comes to experienced management level candidates, that's really when they come to us.
Very good. Thank you. So there's a lot of change, a lot of growth. I know the automotive industry, as JF you mentioned before, is really taking off. What are some of the new and emerging technologies in the auto industry, and how will that impact demand for new employees? Where will the greatest employment needs be? What do you think?
Sure. And I'd like to maybe continue a bit of what JC was saying as well. Is in people are looking for people that have a good match, good fit in their organization. But I would also say that they're probably increasingly going to be looking for people that are able to adapt to change. Because if you think about the car you're driving today compared to the car you may have been driving 10 years ago, or if you start to think about the car you're going to drive 10 years from now, it's dramatically changing. And we often say, people that are either electrician or carpenter or plumber are seeing changes in how they do their job based on the technology that is impacting those sector, but nothing like compared to the changes that's happening in the car. So if you're excited about technology, guess what? The automotive industries is a place to go. If you're thinking about computing, IT, cybersecurity, all of these aspects of technology, electromechanic, you just go on, all of these aspects are included into that, I call it the revolution in the car, because it's increasingly connected, it's increasingly autonomous, and it's increasingly electric or zero emission. And so we saw announcements yesterday from the federal government. We're going to accelerate the adoptions of zero-emission vehicle in Canada. Well, guess what? It's going to impact everything from the design, the marketing, the sale, the repair, maintenance of these vehicles through the entire supply chain. And so I think it creates a lot of movement, opportunities. It might be stressful for someone that is looking for something that doesn't change too much, is very stable in terms of employment, versus someone who's looking for something that's more innovative and looking more on the technology side. And I think those, finding the right fit in terms of industry, because I think you made a mention, they're looking for people in marketing and communication and accounting and finance and all of these, but they're going to be looking for those people that work in an environment that is going to be driven by change, because that's really the future of it. This industry it really is changing. And I think it's very exciting, again, for people who are looking for that kind of industry. But if it's the right fit, yeah, they're looking for all sorts of different role. And, the latest feedback we're getting is, people with an IT-centric type approach, someone who has any kind of experiences about these new technologies is going to find great opportunities in not just the aftermarket, which I could speak to, but also in the overall automotive industries for sure.
Well, I think just listening to how excited you are about what's coming down the pipe is exciting. So you obviously really are thrilled to see these changes that are coming on board and excited about what's going to happen in the industry.
Absolutely.
So Gabriel, I wanted to ask you about your job search as someone who came in fairly recently then in the job you have now. Did you use networking to make contacts within the industry? What was the recruitment process like? I know a lot of grads are always interested in hearing about the sort of boots on the ground. What was it like to get into the job you're in?
All right, that's a great question. So I'd say that if it wasn't for networking, I wouldn't be where I am right now. So key thing there is, and I guess that most of the positions are not even announced in platforms such as LinkedIn, Monster, or whatsoever. Just like mine, my position was never posted. So if I didn't know the right person to be in the right spot, I wouldn't be getting the interview that I had. So for example, in the position that I am currently, I made network and I met one of the program managers here at the company, and he referred me to the HR, and I ended up doing a good interview. I was a good match, both in terms of hard skills, as Jesse said, the resume tells a story, but you need to, so to say, present your resume during the interview. So thankfully, I did a good presentation of myself in that day. But it's always a combination of factors. So I would say that indeed network was what really worked out for me, in the sense that I'm a really organized person. So I kept a history of every position that I applied. I kept like a tracker for myself, so I could see what was working, what was not. So interestingly, when I got this position, I applied to exactly 100 job posts. And I always kept side notes like, okay, I got a referral in this company, or I don't have a referral here. And out of these 100, I got 10 interviews. Out of these 10 interviews, 7 of these were because I had someone to refer me to that position. So this indeed shows, for me, it's a definitely proof that networking is the key for success while job searching. Of course, that applying online might have its results, but the chances and rates of successes are much lower than getting in contact with people. So while I was in college, I ended up college in April last year. It was right at the beginning of COVID-19 times. So I enjoyed every opportunity possible to go to networking events prior to March. So I went to networking events. Most of these presential and held here in Toronto, as the majority of this industry here in Canada is located nearby on the GTA. So I knew a few people, met these people, and always try to keep them in contact, keep constant contact with them through LinkedIn. And what I realized is that the networking is not only one, so to say, one thing that you start and you get in contact, and then you get what you want with what is like building a good relationship with that person, and then you need to keep nurturing that relationship. So it goes both ways. So if you hear of any news that might impact that person's day, or if you remember about something that you guys talked about that might be interesting for that person, keeping them informed on how are you doing on your job search, and keeping sharing this sort of information with them. So for example, whenever I had a network with someone and someone gave me a tip on either a podcast to watch or a book to read, I always went back to them and keeping them posted like, hey, I watched whatever you shared with me. It was insightful. It helped me in this sense. So it shows the person that you are interested in nurturing that relationship, and it makes the person remember of you. So it is a continuous activity. It's not like a single thing that, and even after getting the job, for example, I got my position, but I didn't stop networking, because you never know the tomorrow, right? And you're in the position that now you may be able to support other professionals to reach their goals. So that's mostly what has worked for me in the past, and I guess that's the key for any job searcher and new grad mostly.
That's right.
Yeah,
And JF, did you want to add something? I saw you
yeah,
pop
I was
up.
going to say, Gabrielle, it's so typical and it's so true, because there's an association for everything. The joke sometimes is, geez, Jeff, how many association? But if you ask what is the number one value that associations bring, every survey will show that networking is always the number one reason, because it provides a platform for people to get together and network, and for finding some great business opportunities, whether you're looking for your first job or you're looking for this new joint venture. Those are the kind of places, not just associations, but all of the great example Gabrielle shared, I think, are a great example of how people really make those good connections, and find some successful business ventures. Yeah.
It's so true. And, just I know that a lot of the times people think, well, I've networked, I've got my job, I can sit back and relax now. And, for those of us who've been in our careers for, 30 years, it never ends. And it should be something that's fun. It's not, don't look at it as a chore. Look at it as an opportunity to meet new people, learn new things. And when you look at it like that, it becomes easy. So great information. And
And
Jesse,
can I just add one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that, because as a recruitment firm, I often say, show me, don't tell me, because I get told a lot of things about how great people are, and that's wonderful to have that sort of confidence, but when I really take notice is throughout the process. So do they show up on time? Do they do what they say they're going to do? Do they do it really well? Do they follow up with me? Do they take initiative? There's so many things that I'm paying attention to throughout the process, and I'm so glad that Gabriel gave this perfect example of, show me, don't tell me, because he put in the work. I can see he's very analytical. He had everything very systemized, which is fantastic. And I just love that, one of the things that Gabriel said was that he wanted to be memorable, right? And that really speaks to standing out from the crowd, because really this market is very candidate heavy. However, that means you've just got to put on display everything you've got. So you've got to kind of fight for it, show your value, show your worth by putting in the work. And it is more work maybe now than before to find a position, but that's also an opportunity for the people who have the drive, who have the right attitude. And I can't tell you, I would think more people would reach out to me directly, but they don't, because people like to email or apply online, and that's fine, but just know that there's so many other people doing the same thing. So, the path of least resistance, sure, is email, but if you can go the extra step like Gabriel did and connect with people on LinkedIn and start conversations and start networking, I promise you, I always say your net worth is your network. And that's really how you're going to be more memorable, how you're going to stand out from the crowd, is by putting in that work. So Gabriel's a perfect example of that.
Oh, he sure is. And I think we've all experienced this. And it's great it's just a message that has to continue to be put out there, is to get out there. So that is great. And Jesse, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get in the automotive industry? And, again, typically we think automotive, we do tend to think male as opposed to female, but that is changing. It's changing a lot of, I guess a lot of roles in automotive now. A lot of women are in very powerful roles. But tell us about your experience getting into the automotive industry.
Yeah, for one, it was completely accidental. Because I was going to school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so I was studying law, completely different than what I do today. And I don't think I had the self-awareness yet at that age, a young age, to really know what I wanted to do. And while I was going to school, I was actually working at a dealership as a receptionist. And when I was done school, I needed a full-time job, and that's what was available. So I just continued on sort of the administrative path, which led me to start selling cars. Totally not the plan whatsoever, as life sometimes just takes you. But I had people around me that I guess saw something, believed in me, and kind of pushed me in that direction. So it wasn't intentional. And at that time, we're talking 15 years ago, it was very different. I think the tolerance for how women were being treated at that time was a lot higher than it is today. There's a lot more women who are, like you said, in more senior positions. I think, it's still a male-dominated industry, but that doesn't mean that women should, fear getting into the industry. Like there's still so many groups and support out there, both from women and men. Like some of my, my biggest mentors have been men in this industry. So I think if you have the right attitude and the initiative to work really hard, never let any of those kind of external factors get in your way. And I think some of the women that have even come before me have paved that path where we can excel, and it's a lot. I don't want to say easier, but at least we have more examples today than we did, back in the day, where we're seeing more women in those positions that are succeeding, that we can, draw their experience from.
And those are really good points. And oh, John, JF, you wanted to add, and I was going to say, because I just read in the newspaper, Linamar, the CEO is a woman. She came up from the line, like working on the line kind of thing. And so, what are you experiencing in the aftermarket environment?
Linda at Linamar is a great example, and I came from a different industry, and so that was not male dominated. And so for me, I was able to observe a bit from as a third party view. And I think I'll agree with Jesse is this remains automotive sector all across, including the aftermarket, remains a male dominated industry. We've come a long way, but it is something that I think is now a lot more welcoming to women. And I think the attitudes are changing, and it's great to see this. And in fact, providing a lot of different opportunities. But I think you have to come in, and I could probably just talk about diversity as a whole. Not only it continues to be a bit of a male-dominated industry, it's a mostly white male type industry a bit, but it is rapidly changing, and I think that it creates a lot of opportunities. It's becoming a lot more democratic in terms of industry, but that there's some remnants of that. I think everyone has to be aware of that as they engage in this industry, so there's no surprises, but the opportunities are there, and I think those glass ceilings are no longer there as they were probably 10 years ago.
And just to add, JF, that I think what you said earlier too around it's just such a massively growing industry. There's so many opportunities that the image of the guy on the line is changing. It's the woman in the IT office. It's a very different environment that is starting to emerge in automotive, and I think it'll be a lot more inclusive. Just Gabriel, I know we're down to about 5 more minutes, but Gabriel, I did want to get an idea of being at Kobe. Where would your career go? What kind of career path is open to you?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So let's draw it back. I'm on the program management side right now. The program management structure that we have here is really lean. So the team is mostly myself and a colleague of mine, and we respond directly to the plant manager, right? So it's a really lean structure, even considering the number of employees that we have here. So the logical career path would be to go from my position, so to say, I'm a program manager right now, could be considered a junior program manager, but the logical path is to go to senior program manager, and up to there could go to a position more related to managing the whole plant in general as a facility. But this would be something looking like 5 to 10 years ahead of now, because our administrative structure here is really lean. So in other sorts of company, so to say, let's call it OEMs like Ford or Toyota or Honda or Mazda and so on. The structure is more sectorized, so they have a strong management department in which they manage multiple projects simultaneously and dealing with multiple countries. So, for example, when I was at Ford, we developed a vehicle that was going to be built in 7 different plants across the world and sold to more than 190 countries. This required us dealing with lots of different plants and so on. So logically would be to go from the position that I was to program manager, a program manager supervisor, and from there up to managerial positions. But this doesn't imply on not switching to more positions more related to the day of the plant, the manufacturing side of the business itself. But in general, in the position that I am, these are more strategical positions in which you take decisions that are more generally related to the overall side of the business instead of only one specific department that's going to be impacted with these.
So I guess as you add on professional development and broaden out your knowledge and interests will take you on different career paths. Sounds great.
Yeah, very much. Yes. Just add one comment. We were talking, and mostly Jeff was talking. JF was talking about organizations before, and indeed we have every sort of sectorized organization. And something that complementing with networking that I said before is to try to look for something that matches your interests, and there you definitely meet people that you can contribute with. So myself, for example, I'm Brazilian, and I'm a program manager in Canada. interestingly, there is an organization for Brazilian project managers in Canada. So yeah, so we are about 400 project managers spread all over Canada, mostly in Toronto and in BC. And we held every sort of program related to mentorship, studying for certifications, networking, and so on. I ended up getting so involved with the organization that I am volunteer myself nowadays. So if anyone is Brazilian and is listening to this conversation or listening to this webinar in the upcoming months, please look for me. I may be able to help you guys to be in contact with the organization. We are the North Project Managers.
Well, that North Project Managers, that is great, and thank you for sharing that with the grads. And I'm just wondering too, and I'll just put it out here: is it okay that the grads do reach out to any of you through LinkedIn just to ask further questions? That would be great.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Now we're at time, and so I just wanted to ask each of you. I have a few questions, not a lot. I have a few questions that have come in, but before we get that, I wanted to ask each of you, just like, what is your message out to the graduates who are considering, directions, coming out from various programs, some from the business programs, some from the arts programs, from our Center for Business, Center for Engineering and Technology. What's your message to a grad about the automotive industry? I'll start with Dale. Okay, yeah.
Sure. I'll start by saying, it's a very exciting industry. It is very much driven by changes in technology. It covers the whole gamut from very small businesses to very large corporation. We talk about fit. You got to find yourself, okay, do I want to work for small organizations or a large one? Automotive sector, I've got them all, from the smallest to the largest. We need all these roles. It will continue to grow, and it is, I think, important, a resilient industry because it's an essential service, and we continue to put more cars on the road. And while we're, mass transit and all that is changing that dynamic, the reality is we forecast there's going to be even more so people into vehicle in the coming years. Mobility is a fundamental, need of the population. So those roles and organization, they might not always be the brand names, as you mentioned earlier. It might not be, Honda, Toyota, GM. We hear Gabrielle's organization. Probably most of us don't know about them, but there's tons and tons of organization involved in the automotive industries, providing great opportunities. Seek them out, and you'll find great opportunities and great careers.
Great, thank you, JF. Jesse, do you want to add your last thing to the grads before we get into questions?
Sure. So for me, I never intended to stay in the auto industry for as long as I have. I actually met my husband through working at the same dealership as him, and today we have 2 beautiful kids and a dog. And so my whole life, dinner talk is surrounding the auto industry. And I think the reason I've stayed in it for so long is because it's just full of people who are innovative, creative, resilient, and frankly, if I'm gonna, choose a career path, I want to, be successful in. It's gonna have to be with people that make me happy on a day-to-day basis, where I enjoy what I'm doing, where I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and so. If anyone's looking for an industry where they can make lots of money, they can have fun, they can use their creativity, I think it's a prime industry that will, receive you with arms wide open. And the rest, it's work. It's definitely a lot of work to get where you want to go. But I think you'll find in this industry, there's so many people open to helping you along the way, as long as you're willing to put the work in to seek out those people.
That's great. Thank you, Jesse. That's great information. And you too are so excited about your career. And that's just wonderful. Just through your, all 3 of you are just so into your career, very excited about the possibilities and the future and where the industry is going. Thanks for that. Gabriel, what about you? What's your last few encouraging words to the grads who are interested in the automotive sector?
That's a nice one. I'd say that if you look like 100 years ago, in which area like we're starting to build cars, and Ford Model T was coming out of the line, all of them equal, just like the same black cars. And if you look ahead for the days in which we are now, the industry has changed so much that nowadays we have space for every sort of professional in this field. So it's not only the guys that are indeed assembling the vehicles, but you got aftermarket, as my colleagues explained it so well. You got lots of IT professionals that are being required lately because cars are going online now. International things are getting it's getting everywhere. So vehicles are connected to networks. They need programmers. They need IT people in general, software engineers. They need designers to design the interior of these vehicles. Lots of marketing professionals, not only in the manufacturers but also in the dealers. They need. There's a place for everyone. In a nutshell, that's what I'm trying to say. So um, even if you're not in a career related to technology or STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, you might find your place in some position related to the area if that's your will. So I'd say that in a nutshell, everyone might find its spot in the sun in the automotive industry. And even with the revolution that we are seeing, for example, with the news that the government announced yesterday, pulling ahead the plans in 5 years to only sell electric vehicles from 2035 on, um, there are still going to be opportunities. They are going to be changing, of course. They are not possibly not in the same area as we have now, but opportunities are still going to be happening and appearing.
That's great. I love that. They'll find their place in the sun. Wonderful. I've got I know our time is tight. I've got a couple of questions. I'm bringing one up here that just came in. Is this it? Oh gosh, sorry. Okay, this is for Gabriel. Outside of building a professional network, are there additional steps that someone with no experience in the automotive industry could take to be considered as a candidate?
All right, nice one. Going to start a quick story. My wife just made a transition in career here in Canada. She used to work in sugarcane industry, and she wanted to go to the continuous improvement area. She knew that she didn't have exactly the skills that continuous improvement professionals have, but she knew what sort of transferable skills she had. So she had the soft skills that the professionals were looking for. She started reaching out to some professionals in that area and understanding with them how this market and how this position worked, and showcasing them, like, not trying to expose herself like, hey, I'm a candidate, I'm looking for a job, but mostly as an informal talks, in the sense of, okay, oh nice, I did something similar to that before, and showing what sort of transferable skills that she had and soft skills that could be applied to any sort of position. So I would say that this is probably the path that I would follow if I'm trying to get into an area in which I don't have any previous experience or exposure. Trying to reach out to these professionals which are already in the field, looking for some sort of advice. So if you go in a rumble position, like, I'm here to listen about what's your day like, and people in general, they like to talk. So they are going to be having nice, so to say, they are going to build a nice view of you. They understand that you went there quietly and asked for their point of view, how they could be possibly getting a colleague in that same area. But you don't need to say these words. Let them build that line of thinking for themselves.
Nice. Okay, I have a couple more that came in. I asked some questions we sent in ahead of the session as well, so I'm going to go to those right now. Okay, with the expansion of electric vehicles and its manufacturing processes, how does this translate into previously built car manufacturing plants that may be oriented towards traditional combustion engine vehicles? Is that an answer or a question that someone could be comfortable answering?
I'd probably say that very much. I guess the best answer would be that automakers who now built a different type of vehicle around a new drivetrain will simply have to retool their production line. It's not overly simple because it's pretty complex. But the reality is whether it's electric vehicle, battery pack, connected cars, ABS braking, going to injections or carburetors, all of these evolution steps in vehicles are just basically matched with changes to production lines, and along the line also automation. As we don't build cars the same way as we did simply because of automations as well. So will it require new skills? Yeah, probably. Would the existing workforce needs to be upskilled? Yes, for sure. Will it provide new opportunities in mechanical repair and maintenance for the aftermarket? Yes, as well. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
No, it's good, and it's a tough one because it encompasses a lot, and given our time, we don't have a lot of time for that. So I think you were able to address it very well. Thanks, JF. Okay, I have another one. In terms of someone who wants to get into the automotive space for marketing, what options are available apart from sales? What kind of a marketer is an automotive company looking for? Maybe Jess, could you address that?
Yeah. Well, I have a marketing and sales background. I think there's lots of different options, and really sales and marketing go hand in hand. So if you don't understand sales really well, marketing is going to be really difficult. They go together, really. They work in unison. So yeah, there's dealership, marketing coordinators. There's automotive dealer groups where they have a marketing department, and those people are responsible for managing the marketing initiatives for several dealerships within the group. That could be anywhere from 2 to 50, depending on how large the group is and how large the department is. And then there's, suppliers that assist dealerships in their marketing. So, the dealership perhaps doesn't want to have an internal department and they want to outsource it. So they'll outsource it to an agency company. And within that agency, there could be advertisers, people that specialize in social media, people that specialize in retention marketing, print, email. I mean, you name it. So there's many different things within marketing that you can specialize in. And I'd say it's, there's always like an entry level position, and there is like a very set path usually where you can grow your career to eventually become even, like the VP of marketing, depending on how large their corporation is.
Okay, great. And it's the new grad thing too. It's, entry level. There's a lot of grads that come on and they're really interested in like, how do I get into these entry level positions? I know that a lot of organizations do offer something like a new grad program or rotational programs. JF, I don't know if I know you're working directly with those companies that are part of the association. Do you hear about new grad programs? Gabe, are there a new grad program with Kobe? Anything like that going on? And either JF or Gabe.
Nothing. I would probably, the short answer would be nothing specific in recent history, but we see from time to time organization looking for various program and recruit some entry-level position. I'll also expand a bit on what Jesse was saying is, you also have some large franchisor. In fact, Canadian Tire is a franchisor that corporately will have people working for them, but there's also agencies and third parties also supporting these people. And at any one level, I think some of these organizations from time to time will go and seek and possibly recruit new grads. Is to stay connected, look for those. LinkedIn is a great place to be. I'm sure Jesse's organization is a good place to go. And directly to the association, scan through the different association group when it sort of relates to what you want to do. And they often will have job boards as well that you might be able to consult as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just adding to what JF just mentioned, I'd say yes. We are probably going to be seeing, I'm just guessing, we're probably going to be seeing the upcoming months or semesters, companies starting to open new grad programs. That's my bet. I would say that, well, the automotive market currently, and when I say currently, I'm like looking a few months ahead and a few months to the past, we have been facing a shortage in microprocessors, which has been holding the whole industry, in stamping parts as well, and assembly and so on. So I would say that probably as this starts to ramp up, we will be having the volume of vehicles manufactured ramping up as well. And these companies, I'm speaking about OEMs, they having new grad programs opening. But I would strongly advise like new grads not only to look at the bigger brands like Toyota, Honda, Ford, GM, and so on, but also at the suppliers. Like, for example, Magna is a huge supplier. They have plenty of positions opened. Martin Rea, well, any sort of supplier is also, your guys are still going to be involved in the same automotive industry. You're getting a glimpse of it, and we are still going to be contributing to mobility in general. So, and even not these ones that I mentioned are big tier one suppliers, so they directly supply the automotive company, but the supply chain is huge. For example, Kobe is we are a tier two. We supply to a company that supplies to the final customer. And there are companies that are supplying to us. So there are plenty of opportunities, and I sincerely expect to have opportunities coming up, even for new grads in the upcoming months.
That's great. So it's an industry with rich opportunities. Anyone who's interested out there, connect with me, connect with the speakers. Every week I do talk about industries. I have done a spotlight specifically on the automotive industry with lots of statistics and things. So you can look back on my Instagram. Thank you. Our time is up. So thank you so much, JF, Jesse, and Gabriel for joining me today. You provided great information for anybody interested in pursuing a career within the automotive industry. We very much appreciate your time. For participants, this session was recorded and will be available on our alumni webpage in about 2 to 3 weeks. Reach out at alumni@georgebrown.ca if you have any questions or comments. But that's it. We're wrapping up. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate everyone being here, especially our presenters. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Goodbye, everyone, and take good care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye. Stay safe.